All right. Hey, guys, and welcome to episode 3 of the Modern Women podcast. We're still going, which is awesome.
Definitely. That is.
And we've got Elizma and Dan and myself, Nick, here again today to talk all things women's business. And we have a really interesting podcast for you guys today, don't we, guys?
Yeah. Oh, we do, yes.
Very
about interesting.
All some pretty cool stuff. So we're going to dive into all things sexual health. We're going to dive into vaginas, not literally, but we were talking a lot about them. And see how we go. So, it's going to be fun. Just us girls and Vanessa, the cameraman, who's going to be loving this episode. He's going to get all the inside scoop of all
definitely.
things women.
Exactly. So how's your week been anyway, Nick?
Yeah, it's been great. Been great, Dan. I can't remember really what happened, to be honest. It's Friday. I'm so tired.
It's just arrived so quickly.
Just
the
weekend.
Long
It's
weekend.
just all blurring into one. Yes, long weekend. So really
exactly.
happy for that.
And you, Elizma, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been relaxing, I guess. Mine has been definitely a bit more relaxing.
Nice.
Took a
Good.
week off.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
I don't know really what I did. I think most of the days I've just been vegging at home, being an oxygen thief. But,
And researching for this as well, Elizma. I'm
course,
assuming
yes.
you're all over
Researched
this.
a lot for this.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, it's going to be a fun podcast today, I think.
It will be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So maybe we should just get into it.
Yeah, let's
where
do
shall
it.
we start?
Wow. Yeah, what should we start with, guys? We have a lot of things we want to talk
We
about.
do. So we'll start with the, not so fun stuff, I think, maybe to start off with.
Yeah.
And we can talk about, things like vaginal discharges and things like that. A lot of women, one of the things that we girls realize is we don't actually know that much about our own bodies when we had to research this. And I think a lot of you women out there feel the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like we think we know everything, but some of the subjects is such taboo subjects that we're either too shy to ask, we just don't know, or we Google things and hope we find some answers.
Yeah.
So that would be one of the, I think, a good thing to start off with, because mucus discharges can range so much, and there's different reasons for it as well. It's not always a bad thing. It has to be put into context in what's happening for that female at that point in life.
Absolutely.
So, of course, it can generally range from clear to like a milky white. That's kind of like what you would consider a normal discharge or a more common discharge. And remember that it can also really fluctuate depending on the female cycle. So depending on your cycle, it can look different. With typically, more discharge sort of like around ovulation and all of that. But then, of course, we get the ones that we have to pay a bit more attention to, maybe go to the doctor and get a diagnosis. So what are some of the discharges that you guys can think of?
Well, I think one of the most common ones is any sort of yeast infection. So that's where a lot of women probably experience that. And that's, to put it nicely, it's really associated with almost, I guess, the name of really like a cottage cheese type consistency. Sometimes it can have, a yeast-like odour. It can. It might be a little bit in terms of sometimes there might be some yellow tinge to that, but for the most part it's that white, clumpy cottage cheese type discharge. And you'll probably then have some redness, itching in that vaginal area as well with that yeast infection. So that's one of the most common ones I see, Elizma.
Yeah, me too. Like a lot of irritation and
exactly, a
redness
lot of
around the
irritation.
area.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can even get some redness around the anal area as well.
That's
when it's
right.
like a yeast infection, right? Yeah.
And what about bacterial vaginosis? That's another really common one that actually gets mistaken for thrush a lot of the time as well.
It does,
and that can be a problem because obviously treatments are different to have infections. So that's a very common one, and I think that we really need to look at the importance of testing, getting swabbed to see what actually is going on there, because even with Candida, there's different types. So there's Candida albicans, there's Candida glabrata and tropicalis, and they're different strains, and particularly the glabrata is a lot harder to treat than the albicans. So to actually know what it is that you have there initially can make things a little bit easier. So more of those recurrent type thrush issues can be more of those less common strains as well. So that's something to
And
be
the
aware of.
bacterial vaginosis is actually quite common, isn't it, Nick? And as you said, it can get mistaken. It's not an STI, which is often women might go to their doctor and their symptoms might then be put into that STI category. So they could even be treated wrongly in that way. But also
just for people out there, STI is sexually transmitted
infection. Yes, see, I'm already abbreviating. But with that bacterial vaginosis as well, one of the differentiating factors can be almost like that fishy odour as well. So sometimes women might notice that as the odour. So definitely that could be alarm bells, as this could be the bacterial vaginosis. But I agree with you, Nick. It's something that we start to look into what is then involved in terms of strain specific. I think with the bacterial vaginosis, it's the Gardnerella. Is that right? Is that the particular bacteria that's involved?
It's one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, bacterial vaginosis a lot of times is just a dysbiosis more than even an infection as such, and then you can have those. It basically is one specific strain might proliferate, like
That's
the
right.
Gardnerella.
Exactly.
Exactly. Dan.
Yeah.
So it's not actually infection as such, but it's just that dysbiotic environment that's happened. Yeah.
Exactly. And when we think about the vaginal microbiome then, if we can start to correlate that with what we look for in the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome is something that, and we can go into this, but from an acidity and alkalinity point of view, we actually want the gut microbiome to be more acidic. The same goes for the vaginal microbiome, and we can touch on where we can actually start to impact that a little bit further down the track. But with that vaginal microbiome, one of the most common genus or species in there is the lactobacillus. So if that is something that becomes imbalanced in any way, or we have got an undergrowth of that, I agree with you, Nick, it's where we start to see these other bacterial strains start to take over and start to then be that sort of starting factor for chronic infections and infections that women actually then can't differentiate it. What is it that I'm experiencing here? Is it a yeast overgrowth? Is it a bacterial overgrowth? Parasites sometimes as well. So,
And it's good that you kind of mentioned that about the acidity, because, a lot of people who read into health stuff, we read a lot about alkalinity and acidity, and we tend to kind of put acidity as a bad thing and alkalinity is a good thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I'm sure there's a ton of websites out there about how to make, your vaginal environment more alkaline, because I think that may be the right thing to do, but it's not, right?
Exactly.
In this situation, you definitely want the pH to be lower, because that's kind of like what kills off all of these microbes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's quite unique, the vaginal microbiome. The gut microbiome is quite diverse, whereas the vaginal microbiome is not at all. It only has a few strains, and as you said, Dan, it's specifically that lactobacilli group, and it's a really interesting ecosystem, pretty much in the vaginal microbiome. I actually love it because it actually feeds itself. So in the gut, generally, we have to take in those foods to feed that our bacteria. In the vagina, it actually produces its own through the epithelial cells, so it produces glycogen to actually feed those specific bacteria. So it's really intelligent, and it's set itself up so it knows what to do.
Exactly.
And then we can see sort of imbalance from there when that becomes disrupted. So
and I love that too, Nick, because when you think about as well, so as you said, the vaginal microbiome really is there. It's basically self-sufficient in a way if it's left in imbalance. Basically, if there are things that are not impacting that, but also too, then we look at what is the function as well of things like vaginal discharge? It's there to support that mucous membrane lining as well. So if we've got that good balance of the discharge of the microbiome, all of these things are meant to be working in harmony, and that's what's actually meant to be that almost barrier or preventative mechanism to any sort of infections. So.
That's right, because discharge is also a way that our bodies cleanse the area of harmful bacteria and things like that, correct?
Yeah.
And then you can get other infections like trichomoniasis, which is like a parasitic type of infection that I believe can be transmitted sexually. That's an STI. Or a sexually transmitted disease. And so typically you'll get more of that greeny, yellowy kind of discharge and a very, very foul odor. So not the fishy odor of the bacterial vaginosis, but just a very offensive kind of odor as well.
A very foamy discharge, and if you do see something like that, that's where you would go straight to the doctor. Because you don't want to leave that sort of thing sitting there.
Absolutely. And then considering that we do need an acidic or a low pH pH environment. Nick, you mentioned earlier that sperm is highly alkaline.
Yes,
So-
it is. So how does that fit? Just another reason that men and women should not be.
That's right.
We can go into the man bashing later.
That'll come later.
So what are some of the things that can disrupt that vaginal microbiome? Sperm is one of them because, as you said, Elizma, it is very alkaline.
Yep.
And so one of the risk factors for sort of dysbiosis is frequent sex, which is kind of interesting. It is
ironic, isn't it?
It is
exactly.
ironic, yes.
Yeah.
So, constant intake of that's material. Vanessa's loving this already. Can really affect that. So I guess that comes to, maybe hygiene around sex and what do you do after sex? Is there, do you just leave it? Do you urinate? What do you do? So I would be saying don't leave it in there. So, if you've had sex at night and then you're just going to fall asleep, then that sperm is sitting in there and it's really disrupting that acidic environment. Yeah. So getting up and at least having a pee, sort of getting some of it out can be really can be really helpful there.
It's that flushing mechanism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Realistically, it's anything that at the end of the day is in some way foreign to that vaginal microbiome. We need to support that flushing action and moving that through. But I agree, Nick, as well. It's when we start to look into sex as well, if women then are starting to use things like synthetic lubricants as well.
Yes.
So if they're then looking, okay, well, I want to support that what I'm doing there and improving my pleasure and whatever that might be, they might be then using a lubricant quite often. That's then also affecting that
There's
acid
a lot of
alkaline.
chemicals in there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And chemicals and any sort of synthetics, dyes, those sorts of things will absolutely affect that that acidity.
So you may want to think, if you did want to use something like a lubricant for whatever reason, maybe rather using something like coconut oil or something like that, right? Rather than a synthetic lubricant.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking, what about spermicide,
Yeah, so
Would
that's
that also change?
Yeah, that definitely changes the microbiome in a negative way. I mean, spermicides aren't used as much as they were in the past, but they are still there and they can be very destructive to the microbiome.
And then, of course, antibiotics, birth control pill, diabetes, all of these things can affect discharge and affect the microbiome.
Smoking is a big one. Smoking is a huge one.
Right, yeah.
It actually affects the. Now I should have done my research better on this, but it actually destroys the lactobacilli species. So it's quite interesting, but it can be very destructive to that microbiome. Yeah.
So once this is like kind of happening, right? So let's say you do have a more alkaline pH, you don't have enough lactobacilli bacteria. Like, what's the stuff that you want to use down there and what you don't want to use down there? Because you don't really want to use washes and soaps and stuff, right?
No, you definitely. And it's funny even saying that with soaps. What are you putting on your hair when you're washing your hair? Because that drips down. So people don't think about that sort of thing as well, and that can still affect it as well. So you want to be staying away from all of those alkalizing type products.
Definitely.
Or stay in the bathtub.
Yeah, exactly, Elizma.
Yeah.
But what about then tampons? So if we think about as women, every month, if we're using certain tampons that are chemically treated in any way,
bleach.
Exactly, then they're chemically bleached as well. So is that something that's also now starting to affect your microbiome as well? In the vaginal microbiome. So that's another thing to consider. Where can we start to change that up? Menstrual cups is obviously something that some women are using now. So it's it's an option.
I'm laughing because I have had an experience with menstrual cups.
Really? Yeah.
I've seen them, but I've not been going to try them.
Let me tell you. I didn't have a great experience with the cup, but should I elaborate? Why not? Go for it. There's only a few of us in the room. So I did try the cup because I heard great things about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's recyclable, isn't it?
Well, you just reuse it. It's great. You don't get a lot of women don't get as much pain with the cup as they do with the tampon, and you can leave it in a lot longer without that risk of that toxic shock issue. So it was great until I tried to get it out. No.
Oh, really?
Yeah, couldn't find it for one.
Wow.
Apparently if you haven't used them before, we're going to get a little bit, you're going to get very personal here. It's only ladies. Vanessa.
Yeah. It's probably happened to someone else.
I don't know. So. Vanessa's going to know me a lot better than so I don't know. This is
I might not want to look it in for the next couple of weeks.
Apparently when you first use them, they can actually suck. When you put them in, they suction. And they go up.
Oh, right.
Until you sort of get used to them. And so it went up and too far for me to reach. So I couldn't find it. So I went for 24 hours and I tried. I was doing contortion moves. I was in the shower, like bearing down like I was having a baby. I was trying to get it out.
Oh my goodness.
And I was almost going to call the doctor. I started to get into panic mode. And then I did the Google, how to get out a menstrual cup. And it was like that. The first thing that came up there was like a load.
So
I feel like this is common. This is common.
Yeah.
This is common. So I did eventually get it out, and I'm still too scarred to go back.
Yeah,
so,
well, I can imagine.
Yeah, but in saying that, some women love them, and
exactly.
it depends on your anatomy as well. Everyone's anatomy is a little bit different. So how are you feeling about it now?
Well, I don't think I'll be trying that.
So then in terms of another option then, Nick, in terms of organic tampons, is that something that you look for?
Yes. Yeah. I only use organic.
That's what I use.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. 100%.
And then it's good that you say, like, some women have different preferences, and it'll depend on the anatomical makeup of the vaginal areas. For some women, they love using tampons. Others, they just don't. They'd rather use pads and stuff like that. So you just have to do what works for you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you were touching on too, Elizma, going into what we can do to start to support that vaginal microbiome and the acid alkaline balance as well. So it's looking at what we're utilising, from a sanitary point of view, tampons, pads, menstrual cups, whatever that might be. Obviously, in terms of lactobacillus being one of the main species in that microbiome, there's a lot I've seen in terms of probiotics out there on the market that are directed towards women's vaginal health. And of course, lactobacillus being the main genus, but then, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's lactobacillus rhamnosus and lactobacillus reuteri. Yes, yeah. So they're probably... That's something as an adjunct to from a lifestyle perspective and overall hygiene perspective that women might look into using as well.
And it's interesting because you can take them orally or you can use them more as a pessary.
Exactly.
And I actually recommend generally doing both because a lot of times what we are taking orally doesn't always get down to that that vaginal microbiome. So you can insert the probiotic as well. You have a little bit of a better effect there.
Absolutely.
A localized effect. Yeah.
And
we've got to remember, talking about the gut microbiome as well, it can definitely have a big influence on the vaginal microbiome because of the proximity of the areas, right? So often depending on how you wipe or if there's anything else going on, it's very easy to sometimes get cross infections. And then that's why, you tend to, if you have a girl, mums would usually, tell them or teach them how to wipe,
Yeah.
What is
wipe
it?
up, not down, isn't it? Or down and up, I don't know. Clearly my mum didn't tell me. What is this that we're talking about?
Front to back.
Front to back.
That's
Okay.
it, front to back.
Front to back. Front to back. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense, Nick. Well, I'm glad we sorted that out.
That's great.
About time. It's better late than never,
Better
right?
late than never. I will take that on. Yeah.
But no, that's kind of like a good point as well. We talked about discharge. We talked about things like yeast infections that can cause pain and discomfort, around the vaginal area and all of that. There's a condition called vaginismus, which some women out there may be familiar with and some not so familiar with. But it's actually more common than we realized. I think a lot of women just don't talk about it. They're ashamed. They think there's something wrong with them. And to kind of explain what vaginismus is, it's kind of like involuntary muscular contraction around the vaginal area. And the most common reason why women know they have an issue there is because sexual penetration can't happen or they experience intense pain during sex. So it'll be like muscle spasms. And that can sometimes have different root causes. So sometimes it is infections like, yeast infections and things like that. Sometimes it's a musculoskeletal issue. Sometimes it's psychological issues. But it can often create lots of distress for women and also impact on their relationships with their partners, because it's not necessarily, I've read a lot of stories about women who got married and then had sex for the first time with their husbands, and then they have this problem and they'll go for years without ever having to consummate their marriage, right? And so do we want to talk a little bit about like what can cause vaginismus and what can we do about vaginismus?
Yeah, I think we were touching on it earlier as well, Elizma, and I like the link that you made there as well. It could be a little bit more left field, but something even like oxalates. So we know that with those oxalate type crystals, if there is a buildup of oxalic acid in the body, that will start to affect muscular joint pain, inflammation generalized. Is that something that could also start to be affecting when we start to consider the muscles involved and around the vaginal area, and looking at how that can start to affect that pain inflammatory response? So oxalates could be something if women are dealing with that. So that's one more sort of left field, I think. I think looking into the pelvic floor, that's probably another area, and where I know there's a lot of different therapies that can be introduced if women are suffering with vaginismus. So they might go down more of the physical therapy path, where they start to improve that pelvic floor and the muscles associated with that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then some of the other things I think that they also sometimes use is dilators. So my understanding is that you can get like different sizes. So they almost apparently, not that I've seen a picture, but apparently they look kind of like a tampon, but you can get them in different kind of sizes. You start with a small one, and it kind of retrains the muscles or forces the muscles to kind of relax. And I've, often like after 2, 3, 4 months of using these dilators on a semi-regular basis, they, a lot of women can, are pain-free, which I just think is great, because I think a lot of women have, there's probably more awareness of it right now at this point in time, but I think, in the past, I can just imagine that no one would have ever talked about, or they would have just endured, right?
Yes, and I'm curious, Elizma, because it sounds like you've treated a few women with that. Once you've given them that overall, not even a diagnosis, but that clarification of this is potentially what it is in terms of a condition and why they feel that way when they're having sex. Have you found that that's almost then been a relief for them? Because it would have to be, wouldn't it? It would have to be in terms of psychologically, if that's something they've been dealing with for months, years with their partner, and having pain during sex and not acknowledging that there could be an actual reason for that and not blaming themselves, there would have to be a relief with that.
I mean, as women, if we can't do what every other woman does or is supposed to do, we feel inadequate. We feel like there's something wrong with us. It's not that these women don't like their partner, so it's not like it's a relationship that's unhealthy or anything like that. And so often the partners are actually very understanding, which kudos to them. And then it's just about and I think maybe sometimes it is the thing, it's just a mind over matter thing, like what people would tell these women, when it's not a mind over matter thing. Sometimes you have to kind of, especially if there's a lot of inflammation around the area, you have to first get the inflammation under control before you can start using things like dilators and pelvic floor exercises and stuff like that, because you first have to kind of like settle the area down. But I guess for me the positive thing is I see a lot more awareness of it out there, and also a lot more positive results in therapies and things like that. So, but that was definitely something that I thought was worth bringing up, for maybe it will help someone out there listening to the podcast.
Absolutely.
So
I think, should we maybe just sort of tie up the discharge or infections and things like that, because I know a lot of women don't want to talk about it. I mean, even we see a lot of clients, and unless we actually dig deep and bring it up, it's never mentioned. So I think women can be a little bit embarrassed sometimes about whether they've got any discharge or infection, or they're not really sure what to do. And so a lot of them are doing things at home that are actually causing more harm than good. So douching for one, or they're soaking tampons in tea tree oil and burning themselves and things like that.
Wow,
so
that would burn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think the message is, if you do have a discharge, one, get it looked at, go to the doctor, get a swab, see what it is, and then talk to a health practitioner that can help you to
don't just put anything up there.
No, and also,
I've heard some horror stories. I don't know how.
Nick. And also don't, if there's a symptom that's come up for you and it's not normal, don't leave it. So seek that support. One of the most common ones I know we all see is something like urinary tract infections. How often have we heard from women that, the pain sort of started and I just left it for a few days, and then by the time I got to my doctor, it was almost then progressing into more of a kidney infection. That's starting to get really significant. So and urinary tract infections are really common. Just to give people a bit of an insight into that, one of the main bacteria that's associated with that is E. coli, and once again it can be associated particularly with increased sex and also post sex as well. So as Nick was saying earlier, with that maybe going to the bathroom after you have sex. So just allowing that flushing to happen as well, so that certain bacteria not basically growing or proliferating in that area to cause that potential infection.
Yeah.
So, and urinary tract infections are, I know I've had one.
Oh,
the
so
symptoms
common.
are awful.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is.
Oh, they're very
uncomfortable.
Very
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
And lots of times young girls get it as well. Like I remember at school, this was. I guess at school is different these days, but I went to a little small town school. I mean, we literally went barefoot to school until we went to high school. So you wouldn't wear school shoes and stuff like that. But our assemblies was sitting on a cold concrete floor,
Yeah.
Gee, you had a big budget in your school, didn't you? No shoes, sat on a concrete floor. Well, what's going on in South Africa?
That's Africa for you. So I remember, sitting on the cold cement floors, and that can often trigger urinary tract infections
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
I mean, these days I don't think kids do that, so I think it's okay.
No.
But
I know too many kids
it's the
that would
good
be.
old days.
Yeah, it's when we were hard back then.
Yeah.
Kids
Right.
are
Yeah,
so
you just put up with it,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Right.
Yeah.
20 miles to school on the hard stones with no
Yes.
shoes on.
That's right. And if
Rode
you-
my horse home.
Well, if I believed my dad, he used to put his toes in the warm cow dung on his way to school to kind of warm up the feet a little bit
wow.
during
That's
winter
okay.
time. So
That's
we're
harsh.
really privileged, aren't we?
Totally. Yeah.
And just on that too, differentiating from urinary tract infections as well, interstitial cystitis. Is that another common one that you both
That is
see?
very
yeah.
common.
Really common.
Yeah.
And it's very common to not pick it up on testing either, right?
Exactly.
So it comes
Yes.
back normal, and they're like, well, we don't know. And I think a lot of the thought and consensus out there is that interstitial cystitis, they used to call it you got cystitis, but we don't know why, right? So we just have to give it a name.
Exactly.
But I think it's now more understood that you can get what we call stealth pathogens often involved in interstitial cystitis.
Yep.
The stealth pathogens are pathogens that are just really good at hiding from the immune system. They can sometimes be pleomorphic. Pleomorphic just means they can change shape, which is how they can evade the immune system. So bacteria will tend to have like an L shape or a spherical shape, like a round shape or a rod shape, and it just means it can sometimes change its morphology or its shape, which means the immune system is like, well, I can't. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And these organisms are just very good at hiding. There's a common one in urinary tract infections, and I can't for the life of me remember it. It'll probably come to me afterwards.
Yeah.
But that's often a trigger or a root cause of things like interstitial cystitis
Absolutely,
as well.
Elizma. I know just as a general, at looking at any sort of systemic inflammation, gut inflammation, autoimmune diseases, leaky gut, dysbiosis, those sorts of things can definitely be triggers for that. So, and I agree with you, any sort of stealth pathogens. I was looking into even certain infections maybe as well. So there was some research I was doing like Enterococcus, Lyme disease, Bartonella,
Yes.
chlamydia, those sorts of ones. So
Yeah.
that could be something as well if that's being left undiagnosed or
Absolutely.
unidentified. So
And I think that's a really good point with things being left or not diagnosed. And a lot of these infections are asymptomatic as well.
Yeah,
So women
yeah.
don't even know. And then, they may get something like they might get some pain during sex or a little bit of blood after sex and that sort of thing. And they don't think much of it. And if it's left for a long time, it can then cause pelvic inflammatory disease, which can then lead
just
on to
get worse.
infertility
Yes.
and things like that. So it's
Yep.
really important that if you do notice any changes down there, just to get it checked out, just to be on the
Yeah.
safe side.
exactly.
What about something like, this is more viral, but what about herpes infections? Because you get the simplex 1 and simplex 2
Yeah.
infections.
Yes.
So with viruses, typically we can't get rid of them. We can only really suppress them. So if you did contract an infection like that, which would be an STD, the best thing you can do is kind of keep your immune system
Exactly.
up and healthy, because you can suppress it for years and years and
Yes.
years and never actually have any symptoms, right?
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that immune system response as well, that really starts to feed heavily into then maybe what's going on from a infection onset, vaginal microbiome health. What's the trigger? Is the immune system overreacting? Is it underreacting?
Yeah.
It's about that balancing act again, really, isn't it?
That's
So
right.
yeah.
And stress, obviously if you've got a lot of stress, that'll lower the immune system,
Exactly.
and then the infections like that will be overly expressed.
Exactly.
and-
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So what else can we talk about with vaginas?
Well, I was thinking before we start to get into some other topics, it will come
got
up.
some good stuff.
I know you do. I know you do. One very common one that comes up almost every day when we see our clients is libido. I think
yes.
that is
Big.
that's a huge one.
And not spoken about, because
Yes.
you know, you'll talk to a female and she'll say, oh, you know, just and be really quiet about it and embarrassed
Yeah.
about it, not realise that it's so common.
Oh, very
is.
you know,
common.
Yeah.
Because we get like a little bit, you know, society, we're definitely going to get into that. Society is kind of like, you know, the stuff that we're exposed to from a very young age, it kind of makes it out like we're all supposed to be, you know, always wanting to have sex and always ready for it, and you know, doing it in all these funky positions as well. And I think there's a very big misconception about how women behave during sex, and also our sex drives and what we like and what we don't like, right? So I think that's kind of like where women may feel like, well, it's, you know,
Am I abnormal?
am I
Yes.
abnormal because I don't feel like having sex with my
Yeah.
partner? You know, is there something, why don't I desire my partner, or
Yeah.
why, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, and actually this triggered I don't know if this is appropriate for this podcast, but me and my husband had a quirky discussion yesterday, and he came out with this, not me. And he says, what would it be like if women were born with penises and men were born with vaginas? And I kind of thought about it, and I thought, yeah, you know, the world did it, God did it the wrong way around. He got
Yeah.
it wrong on this one,
Yeah.
because I figured, so no, humor me on this one. So if women had the
I'm waiting.
penis,
Yeah, I know.
well, if women had the penis, they have the power, right?
Oh.
In other
I like
words,
that.
if a man comes home at night and he says, I'm horny, can we do it? And the woman can't get it up, it's not going to happen, right?
yeah.
So he will have to wash the dishes, he'll have to massage her feet to get her in the mood, to get it up, and then he'll get what he wants, right?
Yeah.
So I just thought, yeah,
That's brilliant.
that's how it should have been.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm
anyway, that's
I'm really
no,
interested
I love
in that
that. I love that.
conversation.
Off
God, if
topic.
you're listening next time round.
I know. Can you change that up again?
Yeah.
You know.
But yeah, back on track, libido, definitely a big one.
Yeah. And so, what would be some of the many factors that could start to fall into why a woman might have a low libido, high libido potentially, but low libido is one that we all see a lot, I
Yeah.
would say. So
Stress is
yeah.
But it's good that you say high libido as well, because
Yes.
you do get women who are that just can't get enough, right?
Exactly.
2-3 times a day, and their poor husbands are like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And there's biochemical reasons for this.
Exactly.
So in that instance, you know, dopamine would definitely
Yes.
be playing a huge role, and that's why we often see women with manic depression or bipolar disorder. They can often, especially in their manic stages, have this just, you know, out of control kind of libido kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then low dopamine will tend to have the opposite effect.
Exactly.
Yeah, and dopamine is kind of like, again, our reward system. It's us looking for pleasure, looking for something that makes us feel good. So dopamine definitely plays a big role there.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that you can think of?
I would say with low libido, definitely looking into any sort of hormonal imbalances, particularly testosterone. So when we start to look into those androgens, that testosterone, and I see it quite commonly in women, because it's often the thing that testosterone androgens is, when we're starting to look into hormonal imbalances, it's almost put to the side a little bit, isn't it? It's kind of like estrogen and progesterone, let's see what they're doing. Are they balanced? What's happening with your cycle? And then the testosterone and androgens are sort of left over here going, well, I'm actually really suffering over here. And that maybe could be the root cause for someone's really quite low libido. And if that's left untreated, we know that symptom is just going to continue to exist and probably get worse as well.
Yeah, because that we see in things like PCOS or that androgen dominance in women, they also tend to have a much higher libido, right? And much higher sex drive.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we see that also, as you said earlier, Nick, too, with stress, that starts to tie into that. And also that adrenal type picture, though, and the effect that starts to have on our sex hormones overall. So this is where it all starts to really connect. So if we've got that prolonged stress, chronic stress hormone output, maybe higher DHEA, higher cortisol as well, then we start to see the effects on, okay, well, testosterone is now affected by that. We may not have the nutrients required for adequate testosterone, zinc being one of them. So we start to look into those deficiencies. So there's a lot of underlying factors, even when we see a symptom of low libido, that we as practitioners definitely have to go into, isn't it? So
and what about estrogen? Even though estrogen is not a direct effect, as far as I'm aware, on libido as such, we do need estrogen for the vaginal wall to be nice and thick and lubricated and all of that. So a lot of women with low testosterone, they kind of may not get that lubrication or, the stuff that kind of prepares us for sex, so they may just not feel like it, right? Which is very common, like when women enter menopause and things like that as well.
Well, that could be that combined scenario too, couldn't it, Elizma? So the lower estrogen and the low testosterone. So they've got both of that happening. So, I mean, it sounds awful, but what chance do you then have in terms of having a good libido?
I've heard that, applying both testosterone and estrogen cream, like a combination of testosterone and estrogen cream topically, so not taking it internally necessarily, can often help with things like libido and dryness and stuff like that as well. That's something that seems to be one course of action. And I guess it's also important to point out to women who may have family history of estrogen dominant cancers, who are obviously very, very scared or very wary of taking estrogen medications and supplements, is that from all the research that I've done at least, it doesn't seem to absorb or have a systemic effect when estrogen is applied vaginally. So it doesn't seem to get into the system and doesn't seem to affect that. So that, obviously something to always discuss with your doctor, but it doesn't seem to be any risk factors in that sense. So it could be a solution for some women as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So when it starts with libido, what's the next step?
Well, I mean, I guess we could talk specifically about orgasms if we're talking about libido, right?
Absolutely, because that's the next step.
That's the next step, and a lot of women have problems in that area as well. So that was my stomach, by the way. I'm quite hungry. Sorry. Hopefully the microphone didn't pick that up. I feel like I'm just always hungry. I don't know. Every time we're talking, I'm always hungry. Anyway,
we should have some cookies here.
I
know. Did we mention that last time? Yeah, we did. The food platter. Yeah, that's a good healthy cookies.
Healthy cookies.
Yeah. All right. Let's put that down on the list for next time. Okay. Orgasms.
Yes.
Yeah.
More complicated than I thought, I have to say. I investigated it,
Much
and
more complicated.
there's so many neurochemicals
there's more than one
involved.
type of orgasm as well, which is
That's true. Let's start with that,
And
actually.
limelistick. Yeah.
Wow. So I've heard. I'm not speaking well. Anyway, there is. So we've got the clitoral orgasm, we've got the vaginal orgasm, we've got an anal orgasm.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Apparently, so I read.
Wow.
I can't speak
Okay, I don't know
that. And then, like erogenous. So people can have orgasms when their erogenous zones are stimulated.
Yeah, like the nipples or other areas.
Yeah.
There's also dream orgasms as well. So they're actually
That would
not
be a
uncommon.
typical wet dream for men.
I guess it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there is many. Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Very interesting.
It's kind of like, I read something really interesting in that people who've lost their sex organs, like let's say, you get this genital mutilation where the woman may not have a clitoris, or let's say a person is paralyzed and they can't really feel anything there.
Yes,
Apparently the brain can rewire itself to have orgasms in different ways.
Wow.
Like what you mentioned, like, it could be a different area of the body that gets touched or what have you. And I just thought, that's fascinating. So the brain is just amazing to find loopholes.
Yeah, exactly. There's always a way around it, ladies.
That's right. There's always a way around it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there is a lot of women do have trouble with actually orgasming.
Yes.
So that can be quite a big thing as well, and the different reasons around that.
Yeah, so it's right. It's not... I think we all think that we all just work normally and orgasm and all of that, but it doesn't actually. There is actually women who do not orgasm.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were touching on too, Nick, particularly with vaginally, so when we are having sex and it's that, it's like, well, did you orgasm whilst having sex? And it's like when women say, well, no, I didn't and I don't. So that's the other thing. There's this shame potentially tied up in that, particularly with their partners. If this is something that they haven't discussed with their partner as well as, look, this is just something that maybe I don't do, but this is, there are reasons behind that. There's other ways that you can potentially reach that orgasm with your partner, and you need to have those open conversations. And that's another thing that I find women have a lot of shame around. So it's opening up that communication on that. But particularly with vaginally, I think we were touching on a statistic before, is it 1/3 of women can only reach orgasm
vaginally.
Through
So it's actually much rarer than what we believe. So most women cannot. It has to be an external orgasm or a clitoral orgasm. That made me feel a lot better when I read that statistic.
I think it would make a lot of women feel better. I know.
and look, I'm going to say, something a bit more socially kind of aware is that if you have a discussion with your partner on this, and they kind of like, it maybe doesn't sit well for them, that's more the guy's problem. That's an ego thing.
100%.
Because so what? I don't know about you girls, but for women, not everything is about the big O. For us, we can have an amazing sexual experience with our partners without orgasming, because for us, it's an encompassing experience, right? It's the cuddling and the love and the affection. Yeah. It doesn't always have to end in orgasm. Yeah. So that's something that I kind of like has always stuck with me. It's like, there's always this end game, and I hate that.
Yes,
because it just puts pressure on you, right?
And all of these expectations around it, and I agree, Elizma. I'm really glad you brought that up, because if that's something that you take out of the equation, can you still have an amazing sexual experience with your partner? Yes, you can.
You absolutely can. In fact, a better experience, because there is no pressure, there is no expectation, and it's the most amazing experience to have a man who, if you can spend like an hour together in an intimate kind of environment, neither of you orgasm, and you still feel extremely fulfilled and full of love, and there's no like, oh, I didn't make you come, so what did I do wrong, and all of that kind of rubbish, right? That's just that becomes more ego driven.
Absolutely, Elizma. And I wonder how many women are sort of, even as we talk about this now, sitting out there questioning that as well. In terms of if you didn't make your partner come, or they didn't make you orgasm, like what's if that is all that sex is placed on, then maybe it's looking at, okay, we need to have a conversation about that and reframing how you view sex with your partner as well.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say it is an age thing a little bit. I'll say, as I've grown older, and of course my husband's a lot older, I can tell you sex gets better and better as you get older. It's definitely
that's great news for me.
No, but a lot of these problems are often with the young crew.
Yeah, I agree, Elizma.
Because to be quite honest, and it's not about being crude, but young guys are all about their penises, right? When older men generally are more about pleasing the woman. It's all about their pleasure. They get off on their woman being pleased. So it kind of switches around. So, for all you young girls out there is hope for you.
Well, I'm older than you, Elizabeth, and I'm waiting, because I'm single now. I'm like, okay, cool, let's bring it on. Just got to find someone first. Anyway, so I guess going back to orgasms, I think a lot of times too, women, they aren't familiar with their own body. It's so common that women just don't really figure out what's going on down there, don't check it all out, that sort of thing, and to know where everything is and how everything works. So because we're sort of brought up to be...
Well, we're just brought up to lie back on our...
Pretend that area doesn't exist, and just like, whatever happens.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And even moving your body, like a lot of women don't know how to, they sometimes can feel shy during sex, or they don't know how to move their body, because again, we're kind of conditioned by things in society that you're supposed to be this, gasping and writhing on the bed and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, maybe in the male fantasy world it works like that, but it doesn't always work like that in real life.
It just made me had a thought too as well with that, is in terms of balancing that masculine feminine energy as well, and how often if women aren't comfortable in that feminine, and we can talk about that on another time because that's a whole other area, but if they're not comfortable in that, then they're bringing that to their sexual experience as well, and that can start to affect maybe what they are seeking out in terms of pleasure, what pleasure they do have in that moment. So I think that energy as well can be something to explore a bit as well.
Absolutely. And if there's any guys out there watching this, which I doubt,
they probably switched off anyway.
They probably have. There's an old saying that what makes a woman a great lover is a man being a great lover. I just thought I'd put that pearl of wisdom out there.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. And I guess when we start to look into orgasm, what hormones, I know we were chatting about that before too, Elizma, what would be some of the main hormones that are tied up in that actual process?
I was surprised there were so many. Nitric oxide is one of the main ones. So it's interesting, like the body, there's pretty much two gases that makes us function. It's oxygen, which is what we need to, be alive. And then nitric oxide, which dilates the blood vessels and gets the blood flowing to transport that oxygen through the body and do what it's supposed to do. Now, nitric oxide, it's very common, like we know about it in men, that's I think how Viagra works. It kind of gets the blood vessels dilated and then gets more blood rushing to the penis and all of that. It's actually exactly the same for women. So we need, apparently, there needs to be like an increased blood flow, increased nitrogen oxide towards the vaginal area to create a kind of a pressure on the labia, which I did not figure out. I was reading this stuff. I'm like, man, I'm going to look at sex completely differently next time. I'm going to think about all these biochemical stuff. But yeah, apparently you need that rush of blood to create pressure on the clitoris and the labia that then triggers an orgasm. So they've actually been using nutrients like arginine and stuff like that in women who fail to get to orgasm and getting really good results. Now, it may not work for everyone, but I thought, wow, this is very interesting. So there may be a small percentage of women out there who fail to get to orgasm, and this could be one of the reasons. It could be that nitric oxide.
Yes,
Now, also during the sexual experience, you also get this massive rush or massive release of dopamine during orgasm as well. And so dopamine is kind of like what makes us get that euphoric feeling, and it makes us, it's also the stuff that makes us want sex again and again and again. So we're always going back to, oh yeah, that felt great. I want to have that experience again. And also is involved in sexual addiction and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And then we get the release of oxytocin. So oxytocin is a neurotransmitter that gets also released during childbirth. So now, I'm sorry, but there has been some suggestion that because it's the same hormone, women must love childbirth because it's the same as an orgasm. I'm just going to say, no, it does not work like that.
Thank you for clearing that up.
And also, oxytocin gets released with breast. So when a baby suckles on the nipple, you also get oxytocin released. And again, women don't get horny when babies, when they're busy breastfeeding. So I'm just going to clarify that red herring up. So, but yeah, you get this release of oxytocin, and oxytocin is the love hormone. So this is what makes us feel affectionate towards our partner and loving and like, oh my God, I love you so much. Now, both men and women get this oxytocin release, but with women, it lasts a little bit longer than with men, which is why we want to cuddle up after sex, and they're like, I'm going to
snoring in 5 minutes.
Right? So that's kind of like the whole biochemical trail, or at least part of the biochemical trail with orgasm. I thought that was very, very interesting.
That's fascinating.
And, we all know that oxytocin is so good for our brains. So I don't know if that's specifically the chemical, but that old saying about, women can see when a woman has had good sex because she glows. We can just tell. Now, I don't know if that's the oxytocin, but, there's obviously chemicals that gets released that is good for us.
There's no hiding the night before.
Anyway, what else?
That's the first awkward pause. How many more will we have?
I can't think we do.
I'm surprised we got this far without an awkward pause, actually.
That's right.
We've done well, guys.
Well, we did. I think one of the things we do want to address, we've kind of been alluding to it a little bit as well, is kind of like the societal pressures on women when it comes to sex and orgasms and stuff like that, and specifically, the porn industry has a lot to answer for. Absolutely. So maybe we want to discuss a little bit more of that societal aspects. Don't look at me. I was just opening up the conversation.
Why are you all looking at me?
That was yours.
Okay, definitely I don't have any experience with porn, just to set the record straight. Elizma's just choking on her water. Sorry.
I'm glad to hear you don't have any experience.
Oh my God. I've actually lost it.
Okay, this is a serious conversation, ladies. Come on.
Oh my God.
No, my eyes are watering now.
Okay, we'll confirm that Nick has not had any experience.
Just for the record, okay. All right. No, I have not, but I've totally lost my train of thought.
Well, we know it's got a huge influence these days, right? I mean, back in my days, I don't know, it was magazines in the whole plastic sheets, and you had to be a certain age to buy it and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But these days, I mean, kids can get it anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think they read a statistic somewhere that the earliest exposure was around age 11 or something. And I was just shocked. Like 11-year-old kids
scary.
getting hold of, and it's not just the, the old time porn of, maybe some breast or something like that. I mean, we're talking about like really hardcore stuff.
Very explicit stuff.
Very
out there.
explicit stuff.
Yeah, and it's so accessible.
And if they're young boys at 11 looking at these things, then that's how they're growing up thinking this is normal, this is what sex is like,
Exactly.
And that's where I think the problem comes in, because there is that expectation there, and then women aren't behaving, or it's not going the way that these boys that are now turning into men feel that it should be, and then that creates a lot of problems.
Yeah, because I think that's what women should behave like.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that almost becomes from a young age, like if it's 11, that's extremely young, as you were saying, Nick, but if it's from such a young age, that almost then forms the basis and the foundation of their sex education. That's what they then base everything else of from there. And so then when they start to actually explore that with from whatever age, as a teenager, as most boys eventually will do, and then with women, like you said, it's setting up so much, not even just pressure and expectations, but it's a falsity of what it actually is. It's a false view of what having sex with a partner should be like. Now that is different for everyone, but we're looking at an extreme here, which is basically the porn industry. So
and that kind of creates a dissatisfaction in the relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Whether it's sexual or not, you feel like something's lacking because it's not the way that I thought it was going to be.
Exactly.
And the thing is, it's not just boys watching porn; it's girls as well. So girls then learn, this is the way I am supposed to behave when I am with a boy. So you end up with this risk that you can have, young people being in a false relationship because that's just how they think things are supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And whilst we're on the subject of porn, you made a very good point before we start the podcast, Nick, about labioplasties and things about body parts and how unrealistic they look.
Yes.
And what that means for women.
Yeah. And I think that's another really big question that I think a lot of women think, but not many women voice, is do I look normal, or what is normal?
Yeah.
And the porn industry, unfortunately, again, is portraying a unnatural look, that if you ever watch porn, which I have not, but
just to
clarify, I've heard these things, that all the women, they all look the same. Vaginas are all the same.
Interesting.
The old designer vagina.
So it's like the Instagram model. They all look the same.
They all look the same. It's like you put a filter and everyone's the same.
Yeah. And so, men and women think that is what is normal, but it's just one part of normal. I mean, every woman is different, just like aesthetically other parts of our body are all different. So is our vaginas are different.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this labioplasty, this surgery that actually a lot of women are having to redesign their vaginas to look more like they think it should be, is becoming so prevalent. And it's kind of scary because you're mutilating your body for no reason. So that's another really big issue that's come out of porn. That's
absolutely
quite scary.
Yeah. I was going to say something about that, and then it just kind of like gone out of my mind. But yeah, it's a very good point. It's like that's what we think we're supposed to look like. But childbirth, I mean, for any woman who has not had children, it ruins you forever. If you're ever going to have children, and look, children are great, you love them and all of that, but take a photo of your body before you ever fall pregnant with your first child, because it never looks the same. Like your pelvis changes, like your bone structure changes, right? And a lot of women do experience, uterine prolapse and stuff like that, especially if they've had quite a lot of children in quick succession. And it kind of is like your uterus hanging out kind of thing,
There
right?
is a good joke around that, but I'm not going to tell it because that's a good Matt joke, but we won't go there.
Okay. We won't go.
Sorry. Go there. Everyone's hanging now.
I know.
It is going to hang.
Just tell me.
No, it's about the old women that lived in the shoe. That nursery rhyme? There wasn't a woman lived in the
old
shoe.
woman lived in the shoe.
It had so many children, her uterus fell out.
Sorry. That sounds more like a dad joke.
That's an awful dad joke. I was waiting on the punchline.
Okay, sorry. I kept to keep it clean.
But yeah, so there's things like that, and as women, we should be able to accept our bodies and changes with life experiences and all of that. Why we need to fix it and why we want to look like virgins when we're 40 years old. I don't freaking get it. So sometimes we just have to accept our bodies for what it is.
Well, there's even women that have their hymen reattached.
What?
Yeah, I know,
Really?
ridiculous. Because they would be with someone and they want them to think they're a virgin. So
Right.
I mean,
Wow.
I know, right?
I know.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's more
Yeah.
back in the day. But yeah, scary what women will actually do to please a man, because clearly you're not cutting up your vagina for your own
Exactly,
benefit.
no.
Otherwise. So we would hope not.
No, we definitely hope
No,
not.
but I
Yeah.
like the point you make in terms of doing that to please a man.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're not doing something for yourself, particularly when it comes to your sexuality and your body overall, at the end of the day, this is your body and you're taking control and empowering yourself with that. How often are women doing those things to please a man and still feeling dissatisfaction?
That's right.
Yeah.
And we'll just also clear up another ridiculous belief out there is that a lot of just because you don't have a hymen doesn't mean you're not a virgin. I've read stories about fathers sending their daughters year after year to get a check to make sure that they're still virgins. And so just like a lot of girls lose that hymen or tear that hymen with gymnastics, horse riding,
Absolutely.
all kinds of other activities.
Yeah.
So that is like absolutely not any. Just because you don't have a hymen doesn't mean that you've done something you weren't supposed to do. According to your dad or whoever.
Yeah.
So it's just a ridiculous, intervention.
It is
Absolutely.
crazy. Yeah. And I think, this podcast is all about the modern woman and what we go through, but also how we've evolved as women as well. And, it shouldn't be about just pleasing the man and making sure the man is happy and doing everything, whether you feel uncomfortable about it or not, just so the man's happy. I think things really have started to shift and they really need to keep changing as well, because it's not what it's about. It's 50-50.
Well, sex
Absolutely.
sex or intimacy is a dance. So if the man has to take the lead, and if the man is a good dancer, his woman follows, and the whole thing works, right?
Yes.
And so I guess that's kind of how you have a healthy relationship, not just about the one partner participating and not the other one.
Yeah.
But as women, we are programmed to follow the man's lead. So if a man is just like, I don't want to get crude or anything like that, but like typical young guys, they just expect to be serviced or whatever. They're not going to necessarily have the great intimate sexual experience. They'll miss out on a lot of that because they're being more selfish and not attending to their partner and all of that.
Yeah.
But
And I think, we need to find the good balance, because we don't want to demasculise men or make ourselves more masculine.
No,
we
no.
just need to have that balance where we still have enough respect for ourselves that we're not going to do anything we're not comfortable with,
Yeah.
and that there should be that balance there.
yeah, you can still make your man feel like the man. You know?
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just because we're modern women doesn't
Yeah.
mean we want to take charge. In fact, most of us don't want to
No,
take
it's too
charge.
tiring.
We're doing so many other things, like, honestly.
We want the man to take charge.
And let's all face it, we have to keep pretending that the men are the boss.
That's
Let
right.
them think that.
That's right.
Why we pull the strings in the background.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So what else can we cover on all of that?
Well,
Vaginas.
I know that you were kind of alluding to G spots and stuff like that.
The G spot. Yes,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, because how many times have you heard, the elusive G spot? It doesn't really exist.
Does it
and what is it?
exist?
And is that like the holy grail and all that sort of thing? And but it does exist. It's actually not that hard to find, to be honest. So yeah, it's quite easy. I did the research.
Of course you did, Nick. I'm glad.
No, I just read about it, to be honest. But anyway, so yeah, it's actually not that hard to find. Can I tell you where it actually is
absolutely.
located?
I would love to know.
And then all you women can go home tonight and do some of your own homework.
Yeah.
On this. So it's actually located on the anterior wall of your vagina, so the front wall. It's about sort of a finger in, I guess.
Yeah.
What's that? How long? So basically like your saying, you know how you like come here with your finger like that.
Yeah.
Make that motion towards your belly button, and you'll find it can be like
a bump,
like bumpy.
Yes.
Bumpy, spongy. But you'll feel an actual difference in the texture of the
Interesting.
other. Yeah, and it's very sensitive, and it is sort of true. The G spot it does apparently create very good orgasms to get there. So yeah, that's some homework for you girls.
Yeah.
Or men.
Or men, exactly.
Have a look for you.
This is it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get back to the anal orgasm thing. That
okay,
fascinated
that I know nothing about. Believe me.
I was just like, I don't understand it.
I know, you're making me sound
neither
like
do
I'm some
I.
sort of. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, that I don't know.
But there is a
but
thing.
there is.
It is.
I mean,
Okay.
and I have heard that women that a lot of them prefer that.
Yeah.
That have tried it.
Wow.
Don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Go there. But anyway.
Well, for me, it's a one-way valve.
Well, I know things come out, not go up. I'm sorry, and that's the way it should stay.
Exactly. I agree.
But to each their own, you know.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but apparently a lot of women do like it, and they get very intense orgasms out of it. So
Interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's something direct. I doubt it's something directly necessarily to do with the anus. It must be like maybe the positioning and maybe it triggers something else. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think anyone's really researched it.
No,
It's
I don't
like,
think anyone really has.
Not really. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's good.
well, that explains a lot.
That explains
I'm
a lot.
certainly learning a lot from this podcast.
Me
Like,
too.
I did not know that
100%.
much about my body.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
But again, that emphasizes how even in our age, in our 40s, me and Nick, you've got an excuse because you're still a baby. But even at our age, there's still a lot that we just never read about or researched. And we kind of like just put blinkers on. It's like just pretend it's not there, right?
Yeah, and like you and all of us never realised until we actually knew we were doing this podcast and did a bit of research and went, wow, actually, haven't
That's
never
how
really
bodies
thought
work.
about
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
It's just kind of scary.
Yeah.
Because I mean, women are taught don't talk about that. No, it's not socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Yet men growing up with they're always talking about their penises and hanging on to it and telling their mates about all their
giving it like 10 different
and-
names.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So, and again, there's that imbalance again. It's like, why is it acceptable for men, but it's not acceptable for women?
Yeah.
And that's what I think needs to change a little bit as well.
Yeah, there's something interesting I read once as well. It was in an article, and it was a lot of women who work in the porn industry say they learn more about their sexual health. Now we're talking about hygiene and infections and stuff through the porn industry.
Because I think in those realms, Elizma, it's where they open up the conversation and communication. It's, yes, you're working in that space, but how can we obviously keep you as safe and support your health as much as possible by trying to avoid those sorts of infections, supporting your sexual health overall, all of those things. And it really is one of those things that is just totally missed as we grow up. I know as a teenager, I didn't have hardly any exposure to that. And so even as a practitioner, we're all sort of doing our own self-research and self-education along the way.
Yeah.
Some of the more common infections, we see all the time and we know how to tackle those, but some other things we don't, and this is all new. So for any women out there that's sort of listening to this and think that, they're struggling with trying to even understand what's going on for them, I would say just try and continue to open up that conversation with your partner, with your friends, with your, doctor, specialist, gynecologist. Go see a practitioner that specialises in women's sexual health. There's a lot of different avenues to really start to support you in that area. And also I think it's something that's absolutely integral. It's part of our connection to our body. If we're sort of trying to do everything else to be our most healthiest selves, but we're almost missing something that is it's the essence of being a woman. It's something that I think we all need to open up a lot more conversation and education around.
And it's also about being having the freedom to speak, but it's also I'm also, and maybe this is just me being a bit more conservative and all of that, it's also not necessary to, I guess, talk about it all the time either, right? So there can be such a thing as I guess I find that some women may be wanting to, they see it as a liberation of women, so all they talk about all the time is their bodies and their vaginas and stuff like that. And it's like, there is such a thing as, too much as well. So it's having the freedom and the confidence to talk about stuff, but also not wearing, not feeling like you have to talk about it all the time because it's liberating women in some way.
Yeah.
That to me is something I've kind of seen can sometimes happen in the modern sphere of things under the guise of liberating women, and for me it's just like, there's a thing such as oversharing as
Absolutely,
well, right?
Elizma. And I think also it's that intention of who you're sharing it with and why you're sharing it. And I think
is
that's
it for
probably
sensationalism, or is it to actually get advice or understand a bit better, or
and that's it. And I think I totally agree with you. My initial point was really about it's that understanding and that acceptance, which I think as a foundation a lot of women don't have. And so it's opening the conversation around that to get that understanding and acceptance for yourself. And of course, when I talk about speaking with other people, it's the people closest to you. It's the loved ones that you have that connection with, you trust, whatever that is you feel comfortable with. I agree that on the flip side, a therapist, on the flip side, I agree, you probably, you don't need to be sharing it with the world, because at the end of the day, you're doing this for you. This is about you.
I guess I was thinking, because these days you do get a lot of people oversharing on social media and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's like, look, that becomes more sensationalistic, and it's not really about, my opinion, furthering, women's cause and all of that. But anyway, that's my conservative little nature.
No, I agree.
So,
I think it's good. I think if something is starting to impact your life in a negative way, so you're having issues, with sort of vaginal infections or problems with sex and orgasms and things like that, and it really is impacting your life and your relationship, then that's something you really need to address. And a lot of women in the past have just brushed it on the table and go, oh no, it's okay, I'll just deal with it. But I think that you really need to speak up about that. And that's sort of the message I think we're trying to get across. I know we have a laugh and everything in this podcast, but really we're just trying to get it out there that a lot of these things are very normal, and they happen. A lot of women do go through all this sort of thing, and it's okay to speak up about it.
Absolutely.
Do
we want to kind of like touch a little bit on dating later in life and all of that, or
please, because I have no idea.
Because one of the things that I found, I married very young, 22, was married for 17 years or so, and then world was way different back then. Back then we didn't connect on social media and stuff like that. I met my ex-husband at a physiotherapist. It was like a normal kind of face-to-face kind of connection. So when I went through my divorce, it was like, how does this whole dating world kind of thing work, right? So it wasn't just about all the apps and stuff like that, but it's also about what my body looked like. What am I supposed to wax? What am I supposed to do this? What's the expectations and stuff like that. So I felt like more pressure the second time around getting back into the dating world as an older woman. And I just thought, how common is that for women to kind of not having been in the dating game for such a long time and then having to try and re-enter it with
it's very well for me as an older lady as well, and I was in a 9-year relationship and just come out about 5 months ago, and I don't even want to think about it, because I'm like, I don't want to. I did previous to him do the online dating thing. Have some very funny stories about that.
Yeah, tell me about it. There's lots of funny stories about online dating.
And I'm like, I don't want to go down that road again, because I'm sure there's a lot of lovely men online, but for some reason I don't attract them. I attract the
the dick pics, is that the ones you attract?
Yeah, a bit of that. A bit of that. Bit of that.
I hear that's a really
all of that.
Standard thing.
Oh yeah. I actually jumped on Tinder the other day. Big mistake. Weird, just weird. I'm like, gee, they're very forward in their messages, and I'm like, no, I don't think I want to.
But it's a different age demographic. Like I found that the guys in their 30s and younger were all about that, the dick pics and stuff, and then the guys 40 and older were not. They were actually into the conversations and things. But they were obviously the odd few out. But
I got the odd few, because I have set my age limit to 40 plus, 40 something plus.
Oh, you still got
I still got it.
Wow.
I don't know what it is about. I'm looking for my knight in shining armour, and I keep getting idiots wrapped in tinfoil.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. So my thing is that I think, if you're meant to meet someone, it'll just happen organically. You
100%.
exactly run into a physiotherapy thing, or as my dream goes, I'll drop something and run into someone and pick it up and he's right there, that's how it's going to happen for me.
Yeah.
That's my plan anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to go. But
did you go through the same things about like, you know, body awareness, you know, because you're in with someone for a long relationship, so you kind of get a bit more complacent, right? You don't shave your legs as often and all that kind of stuff.
I kept up my maintenance.
You're better than I am then. So for me, it was like all of that stuff, like all of a sudden had to kind of happen.
It's so true. And obviously, as you're older, your body's a bit different as well than when you first got into a relationship years ago. So there's all that pressure as well. And what does it, you know, I'm speaking specifically for us, Elizma, older man, what do they expect? Do they still want that perfect woman, you know, she's still mid-40s, maybe a couple of children, that sort of thing. And there's that pressure to have to be feeling, do I need to, you know, get my body back into shape or be a certain way that I was before children or 10 years ago? And there is a lot of pressure on that.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know, you know, I don't want to necessarily get too graphic or anything like that, but I started, you know, thinking things like, and I did not do any of this, but these are the thoughts.
This is a friend.
These are the thoughts that was crossing my mind. I'm like, what am I supposed to anal bleach now and do all of these things, right?
That's going next level.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just like, I don't know what the expectations are, you know? So I kept it very minimalistic and obviously did not go that far, but it was like a bit of a minefield. It's like, I'm not supposed to know what I look like when I rock up on my first date. You know, not that I expected to have sex on my
well, I mean, if they're looking at your penis at the first date, then you're going down the wrong route, literally.
Yes, that's for sure. I guess that made me realize when I found my dream man, it's the last. I'm never going into the dating world ever again.
Exactly. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. What's it like for you, Dan?
Oh gosh, I must admit. Look, I can't even speak. I must admit, I am still. There's a real traditionalist part of me, and I actually struggle with a lot of the dating world as it is now. I struggle with dating apps. It's just something that I just find I really don't connect with, and it's that pressure again. It's on the flip side, it's almost feeling like, do I need to do this? Is this how I'm meant to meet someone now? Is this what's expected of me? So I think what I had to really do, and you know, and I know a lot of women out there are probably doing that, is you've got to be quite clear then as well about your values and what you want. And especially when you come out of a relationship, that phase is really a time to get clear on what do you want as a woman, what do you want in your life. There's no pressure to rush back into a relationship. There shouldn't be pressure to rush back into dating or sleeping with anyone. So I think I'm probably not the best person to speak about the modern day dating scene.
No, I think what you're actually saying there is way more common. You know, I speak to people, and most people are actually very conservative. They don't have, you know, sex with a person within the first 3 dates, meeting them and all of that. So I think that's also a fallacy that maybe Hollywood is projecting, or I don't know, we get kind of like made believe that, well, that's just kind of like what you do. Look, if you want to do it, great, do it, but it needs to be a comfortable choice, and that's what you want to do, and not a pressurized choice,
exactly right, Elizma. And I think also too, what I've noticed is a bit different from probably when, you know, my parents were in their 20s, and you were getting married quite young, you were having children quite young, you were what we call settling down, and I say that in inverted commas because what does that even mean, you know? It's very different, I find, in my generation at the moment, because that's almost going to the side. It's like people aren't getting married as young. They're probably having a few partners before they even consider engagement, marriage, anything like that. Women are having kids maybe later because they're, you know, maybe focusing on their career earlier in life, which is great. You know, this is all, it's just navigating how things are changing, and that, okay, if you don't, you know, if you find someone young and you get married and you have that life together, amazing, but it's also not feeling the pressure to do that. So I think I felt both. I've also probably felt, you know, I'm 28 and I go, well, should I be married? Should I have kids? Should I have a home? Like all of those things that I just go, I don't have. So what is right? There's no actually right answer. No. It's just finding what it is that you want at your stage in your life.
And we are in an age where that's actually very acceptable. Yes. You know, you don't have to have the babies and the picket fence before age of 30, you know.
Exactly.
That whole biological clock ticking is kind of not that much of a emphasis anymore, and you don't have parents like nagging you that they want to become grandparents soon or anything like that.
I still do.
Oh, you do?
Mum will love me saying that.
She's wanting some grandbabies.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I'm just like, you can look at my brother. That's not for me just yet.
Mine gave up years ago. She doesn't even bother anymore. She goes, well, your ship has sailed.
But no, I agree, Elizma. I think as an overall, it's something that is much more accepted now, which is a good thing. But it's still all the questions that come up, and it's even, for women that might find themselves in a relationship long term and coming out of that in their 30s and thinking this is the other thing. I think it's a Hollywood thing, the one. Mm-hmm. How do we come out of that? Because we're told, well, you found the one and now you're not with the one, so your life's over.
Yeah.
Really? Like,
That's right. Look, to find the one, I think it does happen, but it's a very rare kind of experience, and maybe that's like two soulmates meeting. I don't quite know, but in general, all you're really looking for in life is someone that you love, not necessarily obsessed with as in being the one kind of thing, but someone you love, someone who treats you with respect, someone you want to have children with. I always had this thing like, if you can envisage yourself with this person sitting on a porch, in your 80s, watching your kids run around, then that's the person for you. Yeah. When you stop having that picture in your mind when you're with someone, then the relationship is over. So that was always my kind of, way of seeing how healthy or where the relationship is going.
Because that's a sign that you're growing together, isn't it, Elizma?
Yeah.
Like you're growing through life together and you're growing through those stages together. If you can't see that with someone, then I agree.
Yeah.
And who's to say that there has to be just the one? There can be more than one of the one. I mean, there's different people for different seasons and things like that, and you can be with someone for a long time and learn from them, and they're the one then, but then either you grow or they grow, and then they're not the one. So I think women put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find the one, or the pressure to have children, even women that don't want to have children. So there's so many pressures around all of that as well, and I think a lot of it, women put pressure on themselves with it more so than even men, particularly with that sort of thing.
I agree.
Yeah. It's not necessarily the men putting pressure on. It's just we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
Yeah. So I think everyone has their own journey, and we're getting very deep here, aren't we?
Yeah,
we are.
We've gone from porn to life.
I know, to life advice.
Exactly.
But it's a good
Two
way
ends
of
the spectrum.
That's right. And a good way of kind of like ending it, I guess. Unless is there anything else that we haven't discussed that we want to kind of?
I think we've done most parts of the body today, haven't we? We covered it all, internal and external.
One of the main parts. Yeah. No, I think we've covered. Pretty much everything, Elizma.
Well, and I think this is a good way of kind of like, I guess, wrapping it up, you know.
Yeah.
Hopefully we have answered a lot of questions that people, may have wondered about and needed to know. And this is also a good example that we're willing to kind of talk about anything that you want us to talk about. So if there's anything else you want us to delve into, let us know and we'll do them.
Yeah, 100%.
Now we have to go and get Vanessa some counselling.
Yes.
He's going to walk out of here not feeling well.
No. Okay.
All right, well, I think that's it.
That's it.
Thanks, ladies.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank
We'll see you
you.
next time.
Yep.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye.